Okay, good morning. Thanks again to all the community members standing behind me who came out today. It means a lot to have your support and active civic engagement in this important conversation. And thank you to the press that's here to hear our message and to help facilitate this conversation. So, we're really standing here today to talk about the future of growth in our city, what we want our neighborhoods to look like, and how San Jose is going to make room for future generations and the job growth that we want, and how we do that in a responsible way that works for everyone. That's really why we're here. There's a proposal coming before San Jose City Council in the coming months. It's going to be one of the most important decisions we make for years to come, and it's called Opportunity Housing. It's a blanket upzoning of all neighborhoods in the city, and I urge my colleagues to reject it. This is a hastily thrown together and misguided proposal that's the product of a political establishment that frankly is out of touch and is not taking the time to come out into the community, out into the neighborhoods and talk to average residents about the vision they have for our city. Instead of producing real solutions to build more housing in a sustainable and scalable way, I want to repeat that, sustainable and scalable way, City Hall wants to cut corners and find an easy way out. Well, there's a better way. So let me begin by setting the record straight. We do have a housing crisis, and it's a regional housing crisis. We're short hundreds of thousands of units relative to the demand that is out there that's being generated by incredible job growth, which is a great thing. Of course, a lot of that job growth is not happening in San Jose. It's happening in many of the cities to our north and to our west who need to do their part in building the housing that our region needs. And of course, as the largest city in the region, San Jose is going to have to do its share. We have a plan in our general plan between now and 2040 to build 120,000 new housing units. There is a lot of work to be done to create a city that we can all afford to live in. But City Hall doesn't seem to want to do the work. Instead of proactively pursuing housing development in transit and infrastructure-rich parts of the city, they're throwing their hands up. They're saying, well, just put it anywhere. We can do better than that. From an environmental, economic, and equity perspective, we must do better than that. Increasing density in the periphery of the city would be a quality of life and environmental disaster in the long run. With more cars on the road having to commute virtually everywhere, we will experience traffic gridlock like never before. There's simply not enough public transit infrastructure in our more suburban neighborhoods. In fact, we're standing at a site that's illustrative of that. A little over a year ago, VTA cut service to this stop. You can no longer get a train here where we're standing. It doesn't run. You can't get downtown from here. A little farther in to where we're talking about adding a lot of density, that stop is also cut. Twice now in the last few years, VTA has proposed cutting the last bus line. There used to be more than one. Now there's one that serves all of Almaden Valley, 40,000 residents. VTA has tried to cut it twice in the last few years. I can't, in good conscience, I don't think any representative of the community could stand up here and say, well, we're going to defund transit. We have no plans to make any investments in helping people get around more effectively, more efficiently, but let's go ahead and just start adding more housing indiscriminately. I don't know how that's common sense. I don't know how that works for our community. We're not alone. VTA's cut bus service in Berryessa, parts of East San Jose, Evergreen, all neighborhoods outside of our urban core and our primary transit corridors. 2 months ago, I received a report from our City Department of Transportation that projects no transition from cars to alternative modes of transportation in many of our neighborhoods. And a good half of our district, basically everywhere south of here, because it projects no investment in infrastructure. So our transportation plan is strategic, it's focused, it's targeted, it's targeting the places where our planners think it makes sense to transition people out of cars. Well, our housing development policy should do the same. So this proposal, the fourplex plan, will inevitably and significantly increase vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, which is the total distance San Joseans are driving, and is one of the most important measures of environmental sustainability. Today, already over 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions in San Jose come from the transportation sector. As you can see on the map to my left here, development in red areas, there's a good chunk of that map, including this area here, will cause an unmitigatable rise in VMT. Until transit infrastructure and service levels catch up, we should not be talking about densifying neighborhoods on the edges of our city for the sake of our air quality, our health, and the fight against climate change. A one-size-fits-all housing policy fits no one. Let's talk about gentrification. By promoting fourplex development in single-family neighborhoods, do you know where it's going to happen? I guarantee if this policy is implemented, you'll have investment groups out there buying up single-family homes, redeveloping them as fourplexes, and it's not going to happen where the homes are $2 million. It's going to happen where they're $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. It's going to happen in our lowest income communities that already face tremendous displacement pressure. This is not a strategic plan. In this unpredictable fourplex lottery, those who are lucky enough to have the market work in their favor will retain their suburban neighborhoods. Many others will be displaced. No, we need a structured, smart growth plan, not the constant threat of displacement. So while redlining and historical restrictions on who could purchase homes in certain single-family neighborhoods were undoubtedly born of racist intent, we should be clear about that, that does not mean the solution today is blanket, indiscriminate upzoning. In fact, thoughtless upzoning policies in cities across the country have resulted in even greater segregation and displacement. We've seen that in neighborhoods in Chicago, New York, many other parts of the city. Oakland. So we should focus on the policies that cause the least harm for the greatest benefit. And I understand the good intentions behind wanting to undo single-family zoning in the name of racial justice. They are well intended. But I'd like to point out that we've begun that experiment already. Across the entire city, homeowners can already add ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, a backyard unit, 1 or 2. They can convert garages. So that concept of gentle densification is an experiment that we're running. In fact, this year, the city is now on track to receive over 1,000 permit applications for ADUs. And these ADU applicants are typically homeowners who want to make room for aging parents or children returning from college or whatever the case may be. That's not a bad thing, but this is a significant experiment. We ought to run that experiment, see how it goes before we consider doubling down or maybe quadrupling down on density in our far-flung suburban neighborhoods. So what should we do instead? Well, we should spend our time, city staff should spend its time, focused on effective housing solutions, not symbolic proposals that sound good but are going to mostly intensify gridlock, air pollution, and gentrification. There's a better way. So today I'm introducing Smart Growth San Jose, which is my plan to densify our urban core, our transit corridors, to build the housing we need without indiscriminately scattering fourplexes across the city. So here's what I'm proposing. Our city already has identified 68 urban village sites that can accommodate new homes without creating more traffic gridlock and more gentrification because they're close to jobs and retail and transit infrastructure like the no longer operating light rail station we're standing next to today. In fact, we're standing in a promised urban village, one of those 68 urban villages, around the mall here and along Blossom Hill Road corridor, which is surprisingly low density, but has many amenities, has transit infrastructure we're not even using anymore. It's a parking lot probably most of the time. This is unacceptable. These are the places, and particularly downtown North San Jose and some of our larger urban villages, are the places we want to focus development because they can provide density without gridlock, housing without displacement, and growth without accelerating climate change. The map on my right shows where these designated urban villages are located in the city. Our existing general plan, San Jose's General Plan 2040, maps out where the city can sustain a significant growth in housing and jobs, providing for an estimated increase of 120,000 new housing units. Our general plan underwent years of review and engaged thousands of residents. It's actually a fairly solid roadmap to follow as we experience continued growth. We've identified the areas that can and should sustain smart growth. But you know what? The city bureaucracy has maintained all of the barriers to building housing in them. These barriers include mindless regulations, incredibly bureaucratic processes, the risk of spending millions of dollars to put forward a project proposal only to have it rejected, individual and lengthy environmental reviews for pro-environment investments like transit-oriented apartment projects on already paved parcels of land, and other government-created barriers. In fact, our current policy prohibits building housing in many of our urban villages until they reach a certain threshold of additional job growth. Of course, that job growth will only create the need for more housing. So we say we have a housing crisis, we say we need housing today, and then we put up countless barriers to actually producing it. In all, despite designating 68 urban villages on paper, the city's planning department over the last decade, since the plan was put in place, has only approved 13 of them. And we've hardly put any shovels in the ground in any of them. So it's a great plan, totally failed execution. So what would it take for us to realize this strategy, a smart growth strategy for San Jose? How can we achieve a focused, mixed-use, transit-oriented strategy centered on urban villages? Well, first, we can change the rules that are within our control. Instead of making individual projects jump through numerous hoops that can take years and cost millions of dollars, we should pre-approve project locations, design guidelines, community engagement and mitigation related rules, environmental mitigations, and other project elements within all of our 68 designated urban villages today. If a developer can build a well-designed new building near transit that meets our affordable housing requirements, approval of such a project should take weeks or months, not years. That step alone will lower the cost of housing by tens of thousands of dollars a door and dramatically speed up construction of new housing in our urban villages. Second, we need to make City Hall accountable for providing high-quality service to those who want to build housing in our city. Our planning department should set and publish their customer service goals, such as response times for permit applications and inspections. And when they are late, as is far too often the case these days, fees ought to be discounted or waived for the applicant. Our planning department ought to be accountable for doing its job. San Joseans work hard to earn their paycheck, and their government ought to do the same. Third, we've got to invest in people and innovation to bring down the cost of constructing housing. There's simply not enough qualified workers to build the new housing we need, and the way that we build housing hasn't fundamentally changed in hundreds of years. We build it by hand, on site, one nail and one 2x4 at a time. We need more trained workers in the building trades, and we need to embrace new technologies like modular construction and 3D printing that can dramatically lower costs. Research shows that the average American worker is 2.5 times more productive today than they were in 1950. We have not seen those productivity gains in the construction business. So we have a shortage of skilled workers and a deficit of innovation, and together that's contributing to the high cost of building housing. And local government can help now by offering training at our community colleges so workers can spend a year learning the skills they need to enter the construction trades. The return on investment of such a program would be profound. It would lower the cost of housing, put people to work, and make our city more equitable by employing groups that have historically been excluded from the trades. We can also use our buying power and incentives to jumpstart innovation, like offering faster permitting and rebates for projects that use new technologies like modular construction and 3D printing. Modular or factory-made units produced off-site can save up to 20% on the cost of building a standard multifamily development and shorten construction timelines by up to 50%. So the city ought to leverage its considerable investment in affordable housing, city and county, I'll add, in publicly subsidized affordable housing to facilitate the transition to more innovative construction methods. At the end of the day, a one-size-fits-all upzoning of an expansive, sprawling city like San Jose that already has some of the worst traffic and least effective transit in the country is simply a flawed approach. For every additional person it houses, it will put another car on the road, more time in our commutes, and more pollution in our air. It will incentivize redevelopment and gentrification in our most vulnerable neighborhoods without giving us the amount of housing that we actually need to solve the problem. And it will distract our planning department from executing on a sustainable transit-oriented strategy that could work at scale and that can improve our collective quality of life. We need real solutions that bring people together. And Opportunity Housing fails on both those fronts. But there is a better way forward. A way that makes room for future generations, offers choice to people of different walks of life and at different moments in their life journeys, and that allows a greater number of us to gradually transition from car dependence to more walkable and bikeable urban neighborhoods. This is a positive vision of San Jose's future. It's one that's scalable, sustainable, and can offer something for everyone. This is the future we should be fighting for. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have a few other speakers who want to briefly address the press this morning. I hope press will stick around for a few more minutes here. I want to start by thanking and welcoming Samuel Washington, president of the Black Chamber of Commerce here in Silicon Valley. Vice president, is that right? Or you're president. All right, president. You got a promotion. Congratulations, Samuel. Thank you for being here this morning. Why don't you come on up?
Friends and neighbors, I have to say, Councilman Mayans, he's on it. The items he describes represent very well the future options that the city of San Jose has and the region of Silicon Valley has. I'm Samuel Washington. I'm president of the Silicon Valley Black Chamber of Commerce. I want to share with you just a quick thing. I came here 26 years ago to San Jose, invited by the county of Santa Clara as a consultant. It was too expensive for me then to get a place here. Just as a renter, I ended up living with a family for quite a few months. I finally found a place that was in a price range I could afford at my income, and I wasn't working for minimum wage. It was in San Francisco, if you can believe it. So I want to say this. San Jose's housing crisis isn't just a problem for the poor, for the black and brown residents of the city. But today I am sharing on behalf of the black residents and black businesses of San Jose. For us, it is critical that the 2040 Envision plan be implemented as quickly as possible. It should be the number one immediate item on the agenda of the leadership of this city. If the solution is going to be the urban villages, that's wonderful. It ought to be something like it. This empty space over here that was approved years ago, I think now, 10 years ago, that has no action on it at all, is an example of the problem. Whatever the solution proves to be, housing zoning and housing development must become the standing main agenda item at San Jose City Hall. It's not that there isn't affordable housing in this city. There isn't even reasonable housing available in San Jose. I recently discussed buying a double-wide manufactured home here, a few miles north. And while the price of the home was great, unfortunately the price of the land, the monthly rate for the land, was double the value of the home. So that there was no way I could afford it based on the cost of just renting the land every month. But the worst part of that wasn't me looking at it. The worst part was the senior citizens who live in that area, who actually lived on that property. They could no longer afford to live there. So some of them were discussing literally walking away from their homes because they couldn't afford the price increase of the land on the property. They are trapped. And that, unfortunately, is the situation of quite a few people who work here in the city. In fact, those who live here, who are still having to live with their parents. or like me, had to find some friendly neighbors to move in with. Here's the problem. From my view, and I think from the view of the chamber, the death of even credible San Jose housing has partnered with the fact of bare minimum employment opportunities and business opportunities for the black community here in San Jose. Combined with the nearly 2 years of mandates and shutdowns and all of those things that have happened in the last couple of years, San Jose's black residential and business community are on life support. And that's a fact. The great majority of small businesses depend on residents for their income, for their revenue. They depend on local people. When you don't have local people, you don't have business and you don't have jobs. And so what we end up with is a city dedicated to large corporations and supporting their staff and their operations and their programs. And those of you who run a small business or are trying to have a small business or trying to keep a small business, no, that's not going to happen. And if you're a black business in San Jose, that's not going to happen at all. The future is dead. In the 10 years since the city of San Jose, and you all ought to look at the 2040 Envision plan. You ought to look at the housing plan. It's actually quite good. Saves all those fine folks who want to keep their individual home neighborhoods, and at the same time it provides opportunity for workers to have some place to live, communities to live in, urban communities to live in, while they develop their businesses and their careers. I like to think that's what people want for their children and not just the members of the Black Chamber. In spite of that, in the roughly 10 years since that program has come into existence, only 3 urban villages are in development. And I mean, they're dragging through the city stages. There's none developed now. 13 have been approved by the city with no action at all, but some planned sometime in the future. And 68, the rest of the 68, no action at all. Now, this is supposed to be a plan that's going to be put in place by 2040. I think it's more like 2110. And that's pretty much the end of this generation and maybe 2 or 3 others on this current track. And for the Black Chamber, for our businesses, well, it was nice knowing you all. So here's the thing. We at the Silicon Valley Black Chamber of Commerce have some ideas to help improve on that schedule. And we hope to collaborate with the city leaders in sharing some best next steps forward, like the ones Councilman Mahan is proposing fairly quickly. Housing in San Jose is a desperate first agenda item. There is nothing more important. And I'm saying this from 26 years ago. So at this distance, folks, we need resolute action now for all of us, black, brown, yellow, and everyone in between. Any person who's trying to live and work here in this city is struggling. And so we invite the city. We are asking the city. In fact, I'll say what I was never going to say. We're begging the city to act on this plan now. Today. Focus on bringing viable, reasonable, and affordable housing to the people of San Jose. That's the stand and the position and the hope, the desire of the Silicon Valley Black Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Samuel. Again, that's Samuel Washington, president of the Black Chamber of Commerce, Silicon Valley. Next up, we have Sandra Delvin from Families and Homes San Jose. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Councilman Mahan, for the opportunity to speak. And thank you to all the council members who have publicly stated their opposition to the significantly densification of single-family neighborhoods even further than allowed by the ADUs under state law. This proposal is known by Opportunity Housing, and that is a marketing term. Families and Homes is a grassroots, volunteer coalition of San Jose residents who oppose this citywide upzoning. Our coalition includes over 20 neighborhood associations from across the city and covers thousands of residents. If adopted, Opportunity Housing would allow up to 7 dwelling units on any single-family parcel anywhere in the city by right. By right means without public comment or review. Opportunity housing produces market rate housing. It does not produce affordable housing. And it does not address the infrastructure and city services issues that it will develop and occur. And once a parcel is upzoned by the current state law, it may not be downsized or downzoned. In summary, if opportunity housing passes, it is a permanent change to our city across all single-family parcels. There is no going back. We will be stuck with all of its adverse and unplanned consequences. So what do we support? We're not just people saying we don't want this. We are in favor of smart infill growth. We support the existing Envision San Jose 2040 general plan, which was talked about previously. It includes urban villages, and it actually accommodates an additional 400,000 inhabitants. That's 40% more than we have living in San Jose today. This plan shields our neighborhoods while providing both market rate and affordable housing in a reasonable and planned manner. We need volunteers. We are a volunteer organization, grassroots. So see me afterwards, or you can go to familieshomessj.org to volunteer so that we can properly plan the future of our city, which we all live in. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sandra Delvin, Families and Homes. And now we have Dave Pushell representing the Sierra Club.
Hey, good morning. Thank you all for your interest in this critical and pressing issue of housing, which is a crisis for far too many. Sierra Club studies housing issues because where and how we live has tremendous impact on whether we protect our open space, natural environment, and the quality of our lives. So while we must produce more housing, we cannot rely on last century's solutions. Without access to transit, with citywide opportunity housing, we will find ourselves locked into another century of worsening auto-dependent gridlock and pollution. San Jose must leap forward with diverse and integrated communities in transit-oriented villages. We can do this. Google's Downtown West project, next to the Dearden train station, will add 4,000 housing units, retail, parks, restore our imperiled Los Gatos Creek, and provide the budget-bolstering office development this city needs to maintain our parks and police force, all integrated with walkable, bikeable, transit-accessible pathways. And Google will not only set aside 1,000 units of affordable housing, but create a $150 million community fund for anti-displacement, homelessness, and affordable housing efforts. Unfortunately, the citywide opportunity housing proposal would have none of these benefits. We need transit solutions to get autos off the road and reduce building footprints so we can increase shared open space, tree canopy, as you can feel today. It's great to be in the shade, huh? And natural cooling and health benefits from trees and access to nature. We need to convert roadways to green streets to improve stormwater runoff. We need to reduce the burden of car expenses on low-income families and its hindrance to the financial independence needed to rise into the middle class. San Jose can bring Silicon Valley innovation and leadership on climate and housing. We can be the rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society needed to prevent the worst effects of climate change that the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. That's Dave Pushell from the Sierra Club.
Growing up, my family didn't have a whole lot of options when it came to housing. We lived in a single-family home in the Seven Trees neighborhood that was owned by my grandmother. My dad worked a number of jobs to provide for us, but for a family of 6, that could be quite challenging. Unable to get a home of our own, Grandma's house was a home for much of my childhood, and the home that would house many of my family members, up to 14 at a time, who struggled to find a home for themselves here in San Jose. This isn't as an uncommon story in San Jose as some would think. My story is shared by numerous families across this city we call home. That's why I'm up here calling on City Hall to expedite the construction of urban villages. As a school district employee who tries to recruit public school teachers, I know firsthand the challenges of the housing market and why we need more housing. We need it now. It needs to be smartly planned so we do not add cars to our roads and pollution to our air. That's the future I want for me and for my son. I encourage San Jose leaders to complete these urban villages and focus on completing them so that many families like mine growing up have an opportunity to have a place to call their home.
Thanks so much, Adriana. That was Adriana Beltran-Cavedo. Finally, Ashley Lee, student at Leland High School.
My name is Ashley Lee, and I'm a student at Leland High School. I'm speaking today because I'm concerned for my future and that of my peers. The housing crisis has gone out of control. Many people in my generation simply won't be able to live in this city because of this rate of the housing crisis. Sadly, we are being priced out of the very neighborhood we grew up in. I first learned about the housing crisis in middle school when my history teacher explained how he had to drive 1.5 hours every day from Hollister because he couldn't afford housing in our city. This is not just about my future, but the future of everyone. Our teachers, our students, youth, and neighbors. From an intergenerational equity perspective, it's imperative that we set ambitious housing goals and actually meet them. We need to not only build more, but also build it strategically. We need dense, mixed-use areas for young professionals to live in affordable communities connected to transit, retail, and commercial spaces. And we need to develop our urban core and create walkable, livable communities. The housing crisis affects everyone greatly. We absolutely have to do better, and that starts with pursuing smart growth to create more units and lower housing costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. That was wonderful. Once again, I just want to close by thanking all the community members who came out today, our speakers. Thank you to everyone who came out to speak. You were all incredibly articulate. And I just, in closing, for members of the press, I just think it's very clear, as you heard from our speakers, there are two visions for how this city moves forward. And one vision is scalable, it's sustainable, it has a real shot at addressing our housing crisis and building the kinds of mixed-use, walkable, dense communities that many of us want, without putting more cars on the road, worsening our climate crisis, detracting from quality of life, and dividing our city. The other plan sounds nice, I suppose, in theory. It doesn't achieve any of that, and it divides the community. It will not solve the problem. We need to stop getting distracted. It's time for City Hall to be accountable for implementing a general plan that is a smart growth plan that houses hundreds of thousands of people, provides that support and density for our small businesses, and creates choice for folks. It's time to actually get it done. We're 10 years in, we've done almost nothing. We've got 20 years to go. I want City Hall to be accountable for delivering on the plan that we all agreed to as a community and that we've laid out, and it's going to work for everyone. Thank you all very much.